It's Not a Boy. Chapter 7, Part 3, in which I am in hospital and about to have my operation and have just been wheeled into the theatre on a trolley. The hospital theatre was a very little room, and on the side of me were two men with cloths over their mouths. All around the room there were white boxes piled high, just like when I'd been in the shoe shop. But these did not have shoes inside. They had medical materials and were very frightening. "Hello, I'm Uncle Sid," said one man in a jolly voice, speaking through the cloth over his mouth so it went backwards and forwards with his breath. "Now there's nothing to be frightened of." And then he put a big mask over my face, and there was a wheel inside and it started whirring. I tasted gas at the back of my throat, and in a panic I sat bolt upright, gasping for air and knocking the mask to the side. Now, this won't do," said pretend Uncle Sid in a not-so-jolly voice this time. And he and his helper both held me down, and I could see that metal mask ready to go over my mouth again. And I knew that could be the end of me, and I might die. I closed my eyes and I let him do what he had to do. The last thing I heard was pretend Uncle Sid singing in a big, black, deep voice, "Dear Ken John Peel," and that wheel whirred and buzzed, and I smelt the stench of gas, and pretend Uncle Sid's voice got slower and slower and far away. And in my head I saw the foxes running and running desperately, trying to get away from the hunters. "Dear Ken John Peel when he's far, far away." I didn't die, of course. I woke up in a line of trolleys with lots of other kids, and I stared up at that green distempered ceiling again and waited. After a long time my trolley was moved, and Nurse Gentle came and wiped my face with a cold flannel. There, that was nothing to be frightened of, was it? You'll soon be home. Isn't that nice? The ice cream was being given out. I'd never had ice cream before, so I was looking forward to it. I sat up in bed, but when Nurse Gentle got to me, she looked at my nose. "Oh, you haven't had your tonsils out. You've only had your tubes cleared. No ice cream for you, I'm afraid, my dear. It will be your turn next time." And on she went with her bowls and spoon. Next time? What was she talking about? I found out a few weeks later when I was at home, because I saw Posty bring another long white envelope. It was there and then that I went under stairs again and shut the door so that I was in the dark. I went right to the bottom end and felt for Dad's gun. It smelled of death. And I wasn't playing any more, and I clicked the trigger. A bullet of fear scalded through me again, and I felt the burn of the shot through my innards. I hadn't been shot, of course, because there were no cartridges in my dad's gun. I knew where they were. They were on the top shelf above my head. They were always there. So I walked out of the understairs quite safely. I knew there was no escape from the hospital for the second time. Mum and Dad left me there again in a hurry so that they could get on with our livelihood, and I sat on that bed and looked at that same distempered ceilings, and tears rolled down my cheeks. "Hello, what are you doing here? I turned and I saw Charlie. It was Charlie Fox from our school. He was on a trolley being wheeled from the theatre. He'd had his tonsils out. "Charlie!" I shouted, but his trolley was rushed off to the end row of our beds. "He knows you. Isn't that nice?" said Nurse Gentle. I had my second operation the next day, and this time I knew there was no going to the theatre like Helen's, and I knew about the mask and the stench of gas, and there was nothing I could do to stop it happening again. I closed my eyes, and I would surely die this time. "Peel's view, halloo, would awaken the dead," I heard pretend Uncle Sid's big black voice, and it faded away into deep water. And this time I didn't see foxes running from the guns in my head. No, I saw those baby fox cubs sinking with me in the sack. I looked up and I saw that pale sky above the water. I clawed for air, but I couldn't get any because that stone was dragging us down to a death at the bottom of our dark drain. I was floating out to the River Humber and then into the North Sea, as dead as the foxes and the little girls from the bombed-out houses in Hull. "Halloo!" I came round from my gassy sleep to a loud noise. "Halloo!" It was Charlie's grandma. She had come to take him home. Nurse Gentle told me that Charlie's mum had died when he was a baby, and his grandma had to look after him as best she could. I must have had my tonsils out at last, because my throat was really sore, and I got my ice cream from Nurse Gentle. Wasn't that nice? Well, it might have been nice, but I couldn't eat it because I could hardly swallow. Anyway, it was all over, and I suppose I must have been brave. I was certainly putting that on my what I am good at list this time. After all I'd been through, I thought that I deserved it, and I hadn't had anything on my list for ages. "Hello!" shouted Charlie when I went back to school after 2 weeks at home. His clothes were raggy and dirty, and he still wiped his nose on his sleeve, but I felt a bit sorry for him now. I knew that his mam had died. If only he hadn't tried to hurt Helen when she couldn't stick up for herself, I could have liked him a bit more. "Why did you cry in hospital?" he suddenly taunted me with a sly grin on his face. Everybody could hear, so I had to think quickly. I didn't want them thinking that I wasn't brave after all. "I was crying for what you did to Helen," I said. "Why did you hit her?" "She said I was a dirty boy, so she deserved it." Well, that was a surprise to me, I can tell you. Helen hadn't told me what she'd said, only what Charlie had done to her. And it made me think even more about my dad's saying that there's always 2 sides to every story. And now I couldn't put all the blame on Charlie. And when we had our singing again at school, I didn't sing that song about hunting foxes so loudly as before, because, as you know, I now felt a bit sorry for the foxes as well as for Charlie. Anyway, we were soon into winter, and on to another song, and that was the end of John Peel and frightening things like operations.